My voice was cracking as I pleaded into the phone, "Dad, I've fallen and broken my leg. I need to go to the hospital." The reply I got shattered more than just my bone. "Clara, are you sure? Can't you just walk it off?" They left me in the woods to suffer. They chose a movie over my well-being. My name is Clara Bennett, and at 24, I found myself at a crossroads I never imagined. It wasn't a career change or a romantic entanglement, but something far more complicated. I sued my parents. And I won. Looking back, it feels surreal, like a movie I watched instead of a life I lived. How does a daughter take her own parents to court? How does she win a massive settlement against them? It sounds like a betrayal, a heartless act, and sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it was. But there's more to the story. It wasn't about the money. It was about something much deeper, a desperate cry for acknowledgement, for the care I deserved but didn't receive. It was about proving a point, a painful one, but a point nonetheless. The story isn't just about a broken leg, but a broken trust. A trust that shattered when my parents refused to take me to the emergency room, leaving me writhing in agony, feeling utterly alone. And the twist? The one that makes the whole situation even more bizarre? The judge, the woman who presided over my case, the woman who ultimately ruled in my favor, she was my secret mentor. Someone who had been quietly guiding me, waiting for this moment, waiting for me to take control of my own life, even if it meant taking my parents to court. It's a tangled web of family, neglect, and a hidden alliance that changed everything. The day it happened started like any other Saturday. Bright sunshine, a hint of a breeze, and the promise of a relaxing afternoon. I decided to go for a hike in the nearby woods, a trail I knew well and often walked alone. I loved the solitude, the way the trees filtered the sunlight, the sounds of birds chirping overhead. It was my escape, my happy place. I was about an hour into my hike, navigating a rocky section of the trail, when it happened. One minute I was stepping confidently, the next my foot slipped on a loose stone, sending me tumbling down a small embankment. I landed awkwardly, my left leg twisting beneath me. The pain was immediate and excruciating. A sharp, searing agony that shot up my leg and stole my breath. I tried to stand, but my leg buckled, and I cried out, a desperate sound swallowed by the vastness of the woods. I knew instantly it was bad. Really bad. Not just a sprain or a strain. I'd broken something. And I was alone, miles from help, with a leg that felt like it was on fire. Panic started to set in, a cold dread creeping through me. How was I going to get out of here? How long would it be before someone found me? The sun was already starting to dip lower in the sky, and I knew I needed to do something, and fast. The fun, relaxing day had turned into a nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to crawl back to the trail, pulling myself along with my arms, my broken leg dragging uselessly behind me. Every movement sent waves of agony through my body, but I knew I had to keep going. I finally reached a spot where I had a weak cell phone signal and called my parents. "Dad, I've fallen and broken my leg. I'm on the hiking trail near Miller's Creek. I need you to come get me, I need to go to the hospital." I pleaded, my voice trembling with pain and fear. There was a pause, then my dad's voice, calm and frustratingly reasonable. "Clara, are you sure it's broken? Maybe it's just a sprain. You know how expensive the emergency room is. Can't you just walk it off?" "Walk it off? Dad, I can't even stand. It's definitely broken. Please, I'm in so much pain." I cried, tears streaming down my face. My mom chimed in, "Honey, we're in the middle of watching a movie. And your father is right, ER visits are so expensive. Maybe you should just try to rest it tonight, and if it's still bad in the morning, we'll see about urgent care." Urgent care? Tomorrow morning? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, Dad, please. I need help now. I'm begging you." But it was no use. They were firm. Rest, ice, and wait until morning. They would not take me to the ER. The call ended with empty promises of checking on me later, leaving me stranded and in agony, feeling utterly betrayed by the people who were supposed to love and protect me most. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. The temperature was dropping quickly, and I started to shiver. I knew I couldn't stay there all night. The pain was relentless, a constant throbbing that made it hard to think straight. The refusal of my parents to take me to the ER wasn't just about the money, though that was certainly a factor. They had always been frugal, bordering on cheap. Every penny was accounted for, every expense scrutinized. They had drilled into me the importance of saving, of avoiding unnecessary costs. But this wasn't an unnecessary cost. This was my health, my well-being. There was also a part of them that just didn't believe me. They had always seen me as dramatic, prone to exaggeration. A scraped knee was a near-fatal injury, a headache was a migraine. I think they genuinely thought I was overreacting. That I could tough it out. But as the hours ticked by, and the pain intensified, my desperation grew. I tried calling friends, but no one answered. I left messages, pleading for help, but the signal was weak and unreliable. I thought about calling 911, but I was afraid of the cost, afraid of the lecture I would get from my parents if I did. I felt utterly alone, abandoned in the woods with a broken leg and a growing sense of despair. My parents, the people who were supposed to be there for me, had failed me. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The trust one had always placed in them began to crumble, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Knowing I couldn't rely on my parents, I started desperately scrolling through my contacts, searching for anyone who might be able to help. I called Sarah, my best friend from high school, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried my aunt, who lived nearby, but she didn't answer either. Each unanswered call felt like another door slamming shut in my face. The problem was, I had always been fiercely independent, a trait my parents had inadvertently fostered. I rarely asked for help, preferring to handle things on my own. As a result, I hadn't cultivated a strong network of support. I had friends, sure, but not the kind you could call in the middle of a crisis. As the hours passed, I started to feel a deep sense of isolation. It wasn't just the physical isolation of being stranded in the woods, but an emotional isolation that cut even deeper. I realized how alone I truly was, how little I could rely on anyone, even the people who were supposed to care about me. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I managed to reach my neighbor, Mrs. Davison. She was an elderly woman, but incredibly kind and resourceful. I explained my situation, my voice cracking with pain and exhaustion. "Oh, you poor dear," she exclaimed. "Don't you worry, I'll come get you right away." Relief washed over me, so intense it almost brought me to my knees. Finally, someone was coming to help. But even as I waited for Mrs. Davison to arrive, a seed of resentment had been planted. The fact that it took an elderly neighbor to do what my own parents wouldn't stung deeply. It was a betrayal I couldn't easily forgive. Mrs. Davison got me to the hospital, where the doctor confirmed what I already knew, a clean break of my tibia. Surgery was required, followed by weeks of physical therapy. My parents visited me in the hospital, but their apologies felt hollow, overshadowed by their initial refusal to help. They kept repeating that they didn't realize how serious it was, but their words rang false. As I lay in my hospital bed, recovering from surgery, I had a lot of time to think. About my parents, about their neglect, about the deep-seated anger that was growing inside me. I started researching my legal options, curious to know if there was anything I could do. I discovered the concept of parental negligence, the legal responsibility of parents to provide for their children's basic needs, including medical care. The more I read, the more convinced I became that my parents had been negligent. They had known I was injured, they had understood the potential severity of the injury, and they had consciously chosen not to provide me with the medical care I needed. The decision to sue my parents was agonizing. It felt like a betrayal, a violation of everything I had been taught about family loyalty. But the anger, the resentment, the feeling of being abandoned, outweighed my hesitation. I wanted them to understand the consequences of their actions, to acknowledge the pain they had caused me. It was the only way I could see to truly hold them accountable. I knew it would be a long and difficult process, but I was determined to see it through. This was no longer just about a broken leg, it was about a broken relationship, and a fight for what I deserved. Finding a lawyer willing to take my case proved to be much harder than I anticipated. I contacted several firms, but most of them declined, citing the ethical complexities of suing one's own parents. It was seen as a taboo, a violation of the sacred bond between parent and child. One lawyer told me point blank that it was a public relations nightmare and that no matter how strong my case was, the optics would be terrible. Another expressed concern about the emotional toll it would take on me, questioning whether I was truly prepared for the fallout. I started to doubt myself. Was I being unreasonable? Was I letting my anger cloud my judgment? Was I really willing to destroy my family for the sake of a lawsuit? The emotional weight of the decision was crushing. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found a young, ambitious lawyer named David Miller. He was relatively new to the field, eager to make a name for himself, and less concerned with the potential backlash. He listened patiently to my story, asked insightful questions, and seemed genuinely sympathetic to my situation. "This is a difficult case, no doubt about it," he admitted. "But I believe you have a valid claim. Your parents had a legal and moral obligation to provide you with medical care, and they failed to do so. I'm willing to take this on, if you're sure you're ready for the fight." His words gave me a renewed sense of hope. He didn't dismiss my concerns, but he also didn't shy away from the challenge. He saw the injustice, the neglect, and he was willing to stand by me, even if it meant going against the grain. With David by my side, I felt like I finally had a chance to get the justice I deserved. Serving my parents with the lawsuit was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The look on their faces when the process server handed them the documents was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and anger. My mom started to cry, while my dad just stood there, his face turning red. "How could you do this to us, Clara?" my mom sobbed. "We're your parents. We love you." "Love?" I retorted, my voice trembling. "Is that what you call it? Leaving me stranded in the woods with a broken leg?" My dad stepped forward, his voice low and menacing. "You're making a huge mistake, Clara. This is going to ruin our family." "Our family was already ruined the day you left me to suffer," I replied, standing my ground. The initial court proceedings were tense and emotionally charged. My parents denied any negligence, claiming they had acted in my best interest, given their financial constraints. They hired a lawyer of their own, a seasoned attorney known for his aggressive tactics. The lawsuit created a deep rift in our family. My siblings took sides, some supporting me, others siding with my parents. Holiday gatherings became strained and awkward, filled with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. My relationship with my parents deteriorated to the point of near total silence. Despite the emotional turmoil, I remained determined to see the case through. I knew it was the right thing to do, even if it meant sacrificing my relationship with my family. I was fighting for more than just money. I was fighting for respect, for acknowledgement, for the right to be treated with the care and compassion I deserved. And I wouldn't back down. The day Judge Thompson entered the courtroom, a hush fell over the room. She was a formidable figure, tall and elegant, with a no-nonsense demeanor that commanded respect. Her reputation preceded her, fair but firm, intelligent and compassionate, a stickler for the law. As she took her seat on the bench, her eyes scanned the courtroom, pausing for a moment when they met mine. It was a brief, almost imperceptible glance, but something in her expression seemed to soften, a flicker of recognition that sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't seen Judge Thompson in years, not since I was a struggling high school student, lost and unsure of my future. Back then, she was just Ms. Thompson, a volunteer at the local community center where I spent my afternoons. She had been my mentor, my confidant, the one person who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She had helped me with my homework, encouraged me to pursue my dreams, and given me the confidence to overcome my insecurities. We had lost touch after I graduated and went off to college, but I had never forgotten her kindness, her wisdom, her unwavering support. Now, here she was, presiding over the most important case of my life. It felt surreal, almost too good to be true. But as I looked into her eyes, I knew that this was no coincidence. This was fate, or something like it. And I had a feeling that my life was about to change in ways I never could have imagined. The faint smile I thought I saw hinted at secrets to come. High school was a blur of anxiety and uncertainty for me. My parents, while well-meaning, were strict and demanding, placing immense pressure on me to excel academically. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid of disappointing them. Ms. Thompson, then a volunteer at the community center, became my safe haven. I would spend hours in her small office, pouring out my heart, sharing my fears and insecurities. She listened without judgment, offering wise counsel and unwavering support. She knew about my parents' high expectations, their constant criticism, their inability to express affection. She understood the emotional toll it was taking on me, the way it was eroding my self-esteem. Ms. Thompson helped me find my voice, encouraging me to stand up for myself, to assert my needs. She taught me the importance of self-care, of setting boundaries, of prioritizing my own well-being. She also saw my potential, my intelligence, my creativity. She pushed me to challenge myself academically, to explore my interests, to pursue my passions. She helped me apply for scholarships, write college essays, and navigate the complex world of higher education. Without Ms. Thompson, I don't know where I would be today. She was more than just a mentor, she was a friend, a confidant, a surrogate mother. She gave me the love and support I wasn't getting at home, the guidance and encouragement I needed to thrive. Now, years later, our paths had crossed again, in the most unexpected way. And as I sat in that courtroom, facing my parents, I knew that Ms. Thompson, now Judge Thompson, was still on my side. She had been waiting, patiently guiding me towards this moment, where I could finally take control of my life and fight for what I deserved. The pieces were falling into place. The trial was a grueling ordeal, a roller coaster of emotions that left me drained and exhausted. David presented compelling evidence, including medical records, expert testimonies, and my own emotional account of the events leading up to the lawsuit. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Henderson, tried to paint me as a spoiled, entitled child, seeking to exploit my parents' financial situation. He questioned my motives, suggesting that I was only after the money. He even brought up my past, highlighting my tendency to exaggerate and dramatize situations, attempting to discredit my testimony. But David was prepared. He skillfully cross-examined the witnesses, exposing the flaws in their arguments and highlighting the inconsistencies in my parents' story. He emphasized the legal and moral obligation of parents to provide for their children's basic needs, including medical care. The most difficult part of the trial was testifying. Reliving the events of that day, recounting the pain and the betrayal, brought back all the emotions I had tried so hard to suppress. I broke down on the stand, sobbing uncontrollably as I described the moment my parents refused to take me to the ER. Seeing me in such distress seemed to affect my parents. I noticed a flicker of regret in their eyes, a hint of remorse that suggested they were finally starting to understand the depth of my pain. But Mr. Henderson quickly intervened, objecting to my emotional outbursts, claiming they were designed to sway the jury. As the trial progressed, it became clear that my parents' defense was weakening. The evidence was mounting against them, and their lawyer was struggling to maintain their credibility. I could sense that Judge Thompson was paying close attention, her expression unreadable, but her gaze unwavering. Despite my emotional struggles, I felt a sense of hope that justice would prevail. Throughout the trial, Judge Thompson maintained a strict demeanor of impartiality. She ruled fairly on objections, ensuring that both sides had an equal opportunity to present their case. She never showed any favoritism towards me, nor did she seem to hold any animosity towards my parents. I could sense the internal conflict she must have been facing. On one hand, she had a personal connection to me, a history of mentorship and support. On the other hand, she had a professional obligation to uphold the law and administer justice fairly, regardless of her personal feelings. There were moments when I caught her glancing at me with a look of concern, a silent acknowledgement of the pain I was enduring. But she never allowed those emotions to influence her decisions. She remained objective, focused on the facts of the case and the applicable laws. I even overheard a conversation between Judge Thompson and her clerk during a recess. "This is a difficult situation, Sarah," she said, her voice low and thoughtful. "I have a personal history with the plaintiff, but I cannot allow that to cloud my judgment. I must remain impartial, regardless of my feelings." Her commitment to impartiality was both admirable and frustrating. I wanted her to be on my side, to show some sign of support, but I also understood that she couldn't. She had a duty to the court, to the law, and to her own integrity. In a way, her impartiality was a testament to her character. It showed that she was a true professional, capable of separating her personal feelings from her professional responsibilities. And it gave me a sense of confidence that whatever decision she ultimately reached, it would be based on the merits of the case, not on any personal bias. I could tell it was difficult for her to stay neutral. The day the verdict was announced, the courtroom was packed. The tension was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. My parents sat rigidly at the defense table, their faces pale and drawn. I sat across from them, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands clammy with sweat. Judge Thompson entered the courtroom, her expression as unreadable as ever. She took her seat on the bench, and the room fell silent. After careful consideration of the evidence presented and the applicable laws, she began, her voice clear and resonant, "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Clara Bennett." A gasp swept through the courtroom. My parents' faces crumpled, their eyes filled with disbelief and despair. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, so intense it almost knocked me off my feet. Judge Thompson continued, explaining the reasoning behind her decision. "The evidence clearly demonstrates that the defendants, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, were negligent in their duty to provide for their daughter's basic needs, including medical care. Their refusal to take her to the emergency room, despite her obvious injury and her pleas for help, constituted a breach of that duty." She went on to emphasize the severity of my suffering, both physical and emotional. Ms. Bennett endured significant pain and distress as a result of her parents' negligence. She suffered not only a broken leg, but also a deep sense of betrayal and abandonment. "This court recognizes the importance of family relationships," she concluded, "but it also recognizes the importance of accountability. Parents have a legal and moral obligation to care for their children, and when they fail to do so, they must be held responsible for the consequences." It was a clear victory. Justice was served. The settlement amount was substantial, far more than I had ever anticipated. It was enough to pay off my student loans, buy a small house, and invest in my future. It was life-changing money, the kind that could open doors and create opportunities one never thought possible. But the money came with its own set of challenges. Suddenly, I was bombarded with requests for loans, investments, and charitable donations. Distant relatives emerged from the woodwork, eager to reconnect and share their sob stories. I had to learn to say no, to protect myself and my newfound financial security. The money also created a distance between me and my friends. Some were envious, others were uncomfortable, and some simply didn't know how to relate to me anymore. I felt like I was living in a different world, one where money was no longer a constant source of stress and anxiety. Despite the challenges, I was grateful for the opportunities the settlement provided. I was able to pursue my passion for photography, traveling the world and capturing its beauty through my lens. I started a foundation to support young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, giving them the resources and opportunities they needed to succeed. The money didn't solve all my problems, but it gave me the freedom to live my life on my own terms. It allowed me to heal, to grow, and to create a future that was filled with purpose and meaning. It was a bittersweet victory, one at a great cost, but one that ultimately empowered me to become the person I was always meant to be. It allowed me to move forward. My parents' reaction to the verdict was a complex mix of emotions. Initially, there was anger, resentment, and a deep sense of betrayal. They couldn't understand how their own daughter could do this to them, how she could drag them through the mud and expose their failings to the world. But as the shock wore off, regret began to creep in. They started to realize the gravity of their actions, the pain they had caused me, and the damage they had inflicted on our relationship. They saw the evidence, they heard the testimony, and they finally understood the depth of my suffering. They reached out to me, hesitant and apologetic, attempting to reconcile. They sent flowers, wrote letters, and left voicemails, expressing their remorse and begging for forgiveness. They admitted they had made mistakes, that they had prioritized money over my well-being, and that they were deeply sorry for their negligence. I was torn. Part of me wanted to forgive them, to rebuild our relationship, to put the past behind us. But another part of me was still angry, still hurt, still unable to trust them completely. The scars of their betrayal ran deep, and I wasn't sure if they could ever fully heal. I agreed to meet with them, cautiously optimistic but also guarded. The meeting was awkward and tense, filled with unspoken emotions and hesitant apologies. They seemed genuinely remorseful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were more concerned about their reputation than about my well-being. The road to reconciliation was long and arduous, filled with ups and downs, progress and setbacks. It was a slow process of rebuilding trust, of forgiving past hurts, and of learning to communicate with each other in a healthy and respectful way. It was a journey that would take time, patience, and a willingness to let go of the past. The future was uncertain. A week after the trial ended, I received a message from Judge Thompson, requesting a meeting in her chambers. I was nervous, unsure of what to expect. I knew she couldn't discuss the case with me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. When I arrived, she greeted me warmly, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and affection. "Clara," she said, "I'm so proud of you. You've come so far." She then proceeded to reveal the full extent of her past influence on my life, and her strategic patience in waiting for this case. She explained that she had always seen my potential, my strength, my resilience. She knew that one day, I would face a challenge that would test me to my core, and she wanted to be there to support me, in whatever way she could. She had followed my career, kept tabs on my personal life, and waited patiently for the right moment to intervene. When she learned about my lawsuit against my parents, she knew that this was it, the opportunity for me to finally take control of my life and fight for what I deserved. She admitted that she had requested to be assigned to my case, knowing that her presence would give me the strength and courage I needed to see it through. She couldn't directly influence the outcome, but she could provide a sense of stability and support during a difficult time. "I knew that you had the strength to do this, Clara," she said. "But I also knew that you needed someone to believe in you, someone to remind you of your worth. I've been waiting for this moment, waiting for you to realize your full potential. And you did. You proved them wrong. You proved yourself right." I was stunned. She had been playing a long game. Her revelation was both shocking and comforting. It confirmed my suspicions about our connection, but it also revealed the depth of her commitment to my well-being. She had been my guardian angel, my secret mentor, guiding me from afar, waiting for the perfect moment to step in and help me claim my destiny. It was all so calculated. In the days and weeks that followed Judge Thompson's revelation, I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had happened. The moral implications of suing my parents, the role of Judge Thompson, and the uncertainty of my future weighed heavily on my mind. Was I right to sue my parents? Did I betray them? Was the money worth the cost? These questions haunted me, swirling around in my head, refusing to be silenced. I also grappled with the role of Judge Thompson. Was she right to intervene in my life, to manipulate the situation from behind the scenes? Did her actions compromise the integrity of the legal system? Or was she simply a caring mentor, doing everything in her power to help me achieve my full potential? And what about my future? Could I ever truly reconcile with my parents? Could I ever find peace with what I had done? Or would I be forever haunted by the memory of this painful chapter in my life? I realized that there were no easy answers, no simple solutions. Life was complex, messy, and full of contradictions. Sometimes, the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. And sometimes, the people who were supposed to love and protect you were the ones who hurt you the most. I knew that I had made mistakes, that I had hurt people along the way. But I also knew that I had acted with the best of intentions, that I had fought for what I believed in, and that I had emerged from the ashes stronger and more resilient than ever before. I had taken control of my life. I had to learn to live with the consequences, to accept the complexities, and to embrace the uncertainty of the future. The weight of it all was substantial. The story doesn't have a neatly tied-up ending, where everyone lives happily ever after. Life rarely does. My relationship with my parents remains a work in progress. We've made some progress, yes. We can now have a conversation without shouting or crying. We even managed to spend a few holidays together, albeit with a palpable undercurrent of tension. But the scars are still there, the wounds haven't fully healed. I don't know if we'll ever be able to completely rebuild the trust that was shattered that day in the woods. I still struggle with feelings of resentment and anger, and they still struggle with feelings of guilt and shame. However, we are trying. We are making an effort to understand each other, to forgive each other, and to move forward. We attend family therapy sessions, where we learn to communicate more effectively and to address the underlying issues that have plagued our relationship for so long. Whether we ultimately achieve full reconciliation remains to be seen. But I'm hopeful. I believe that with time, patience, and a willingness to work hard, we can find a way to coexist peacefully, if not lovingly. As for my overall emotional state, I'm doing okay. I'm not perfect, I still have my moments of doubt and insecurity, but I'm stronger than I've ever been. I've learned to rely on myself, to trust my instincts, and to stand up for what I believe in. I've also learned the importance of forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. I've forgiven my parents for their mistakes, and I've forgiven myself for the choices I've made. And I'm finally at peace with the past, ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold. My life is my own now. It is an ongoing journey. What did I learn from all of this? I learned that justice isn't always fair, that families aren't always loving, and that life can take the most unexpected turns. I learned that sometimes, you have to fight for what you deserve, even if it means going against the people you love. I learned that family responsibility is more than just providing food and shelter, it's about providing love, support, and care, especially when it's needed most. It's about putting your children's needs before your own, even when it's difficult or inconvenient. I also learned that the meaning of justice is subjective, that it can be interpreted in different ways, depending on your perspective. For me, justice wasn't about the money, it was about accountability, about holding my parents responsible for their actions, and about reclaiming my own sense of worth. And finally, I learned that life is full of surprises, both good and bad. You never know what's around the corner, what challenges you'll face, or what opportunities will arise. But you can choose how you respond to those challenges, how you seize those opportunities, and how you create your own destiny. My journey was painful, difficult, and at times, heartbreaking. But it was also empowering, transformative, and ultimately, liberating. I emerged from the ashes a stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate person. And for that, I am grateful. My story is a testament to the power of the human spirit, the importance of family responsibility, and the enduring pursuit of justice. Life is unexpected. This is my story. The most profound lesson from my story isn't just about winning a lawsuit, it's about understanding that family responsibility is not an assumption to be made, but a sacred duty of care. If you were in Clara's position, would you have had the courage to stand up for yourself, even if it meant going against your family? And what does true family responsibility mean to you?